Virtual reality, or VR, allows for otherworldly interactions using insane technology, but the concept isn't as new as you may expect. Today we are going to look at a brief history of how VR has transformed throughout history. Humanity has long been interested in realistic simulations to experience, be it a fictional universe or not. From cave paintings to Call of Duty, these depictions allow us to share our experiences with others and to encounter new realities. Some of the earliest methods of creating a virtual reality were panoramic pictures. These styles of paintings have existed for thousands of years and seek to represent a three-dimensional world by creating a flowing, rotated scene instead of the flat and static picture we are so used to. This remained the closest we had to virtual reality until a few hundred years ago. The problem with panoramas is that they lack depth. Even the invention of photography and panoramic photographs seemed flat. That is until Sir Charles Whetstone invented the stereoscope in 1832. These devices took advantage of parallax, which is the apparent difference in location of objects depending on the viewpoint. For example, when an observer is moving, buildings in the distance appear to move less than those close by. Humans use parallax to view depth, with each eye having a slightly different view of the object. Whetstone realized that he could show each eye a picture from a different perspective to trick the brain into believing it was looking at a three-dimensional object. Enter the 20th century. We have technology. Development in electronics from the Industrial Revolution and World War II have ushered in a new era for virtual reality. In 1929, the first flight trainer, called the Link Trainer, was developed to train new pilots. 1962 saw the creation of the Sensorama by author Morton Heilig. He wanted to see his essay titled The Cinema of the Future come to life, so he made it himself. He designed the Sensorama as a booth with a chair that the user could strap themselves into. The system moved, had a wind machine, released aromas, had stereo sound, and a stereoscopic 3D screen. There were 6 short films to choose from that each had their own choreography to match the senses with the video. The Sensorama never became more than a prototype, though. In 1985, Visual Programming Lab Research, or VPL, was founded. VPL was the first VR company to sell head-mounted displays and gloves. It wasn't until 1987 that founder Jaron Lanier would actually coin the term virtual reality. Virtual reality finally reached commercial gaming in 1993 with Sega VR for the Sega Genesis. This headset was surprisingly modern in design and promised a lot of what is expected from modern VR headsets. Technical challenges kept commercial availability impractical, and the Sega VR never ended up getting anywhere. Nintendo finally joined in on VR in 1995 with the Virtual Boy. This was the greatest VR device of all time and loved by everyone. In reality, the Virtual Boy was a spectacular flop. The static red graphics were straining on the eyes, it was uncomfortable to use, and software support was lacking. After a series of price drops that didn't increase sales, the Virtual Boy was dead, and so too was VR gaming. For over 15 years, there was little to no development in VR gaming. The failures of Sega and Nintendo meant that companies didn't want to risk trying again. In 2012, Palmer Luckey revived VR gaming with a Kickstarter project. The Oculus Rift project raised nearly $2.5 million and proved that there was still an untouched market for VR gaming. By 2014, Facebook had purchased Oculus, and Sony announced their plans to make a VR for PlayStation. Since then, VR gaming has finally reached commercial success. Notable headsets like the Oculus Rift, HTC Vive, Valve Index, and PSVR have found success. Oculus and PSVR have now entered second generation, and the Valve Index is still selling out even though it was released back in 2019. VR games like Beat Saber and Pavlov VR have managed to become well known in the gaming community as a whole, not just VR. VR Chat allows VR and non-VR users to play together, and many games are cross-platform to allow for greater audiences. VR gaming is in its infancy though, with many still feeling that it is not realistic enough. The developments and commercialization of haptic feedback and VR locomotion seek to fix these issues, but the fate of VR gaming is still to be seen.